Hello, welcome back to coverage here at U.S. Nationals. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm in the booth with Reed Duke, and we've got a nice one here, fresh off of his 2 buys. Just a week removed from standing on that podium, holding up the trophy and the check for $100,000. William Huey Jensen, your current world champ, playing against Peter Cadell. And that's got to be a search for his Conta there for Peter, so perfect start for him. As we can see, he's on blue-black control. And it looks like Jensen's running back the energy deck. Any changes for Huey?
Mostly in the sideboard.
Did a little tweaking?
Yeah, I think his main deck is within 1 card, the same as what he used to win the World Championships last weekend. But sideboard completely revamped and some extra toys to help in this matchup.
Key play here early in the game. Jensen with that turn 2 long tusk cub asking a very potent question. Hey, you got the answer for it. And the best answer is Fatal Push, and that's exactly what Peter has. And things are going perfectly for Peter here. He has now countered a Rogue Refiner after killing that long tusk cub, and he gets to untap with now 4 lands, 3 mana available, and a search for his Conta. So perfect start for Peter.
Yeah, most definitely. This becoming one of the important matchups in Standard, and this opening play pattern is becoming recognizable as well as exactly what the blue-black control deck wants to do. Get that search for his Conta into play. You have your card advantage in your late game all set there, and then you just focus on dismantling the Temur deck's threats one at a time. But there's one threat that slipped through the cracks for William Jensen.
I am shocked that resolved. 3 mana available for Peter with 4 or 5 cards in hand, and he couldn't find a counterspell. And that means the Bristling Hydra is a major issue for him. With that activated ability eating up the potential for removal spells and hitting pretty darn hard at 4 to start off with, Peter's going to have his hands full here.
Yeah, so what's going on here is Peter's hand is full of expensive, powerful cards, and he has the search for his Conta to filter his draws and dig for a potential answer to the Hydra, but he's also forced to try to scry lands to the top, using the term scry a little loosely here. But, he needs both answers and he needs lands, and he only gets 1 draw step per turn, so this could get a little out of hand, though he does have a Glimmer of Genius end of turn that can find him some of what he needs.
Boy, it's going to have to find him a lot of what he needs, Reed, because look at that turn from Jensen. He went Servant of the Conduit, get a couple of energy, play Whirler Virtuoso, get a couple of energy, play an Ether Hub, get an energy, attack you with my Hydra, use up 3 of it, 5 you, go. It's like, what a disaster. While Peter did nothing. He just sat there and stared at all this happening with his only defense being this Glimmer of Genius on end step. He has fallen woefully behind the champ here.
That's right. And before we even knew that this is the matchup we were going to watch, you pointed out a really important aspect of this, which is that the blue-black control deck does not have board sweepers. That means Whirler Virtuoso is going to be a very problematic card. Not to say that it wins the game on its own, because Peter could point a couple of removal spells, or he could overpower it with the Scarab God. But in a game that's otherwise close, and while Peter has his hands full with other things, Whirler Virtuoso, very problematic card here.
Yeah, Peter's going to be on, a 2-turner here. Jensen with the ability to crack in for 9, but the big question, of course, Gearhulk.
Yeah, and you can tell William Jensen, aware of that, he conspicuously didn't make a Thopter token end of turn. That's because he wants to make sure he has enough energy to comfortably make his Bristling Hydra large enough to beat Torrential Gearhulk in combat, and then still have 3 or 6 energy in the bank to protect it from a removal spell after the fact.
Smart play from Jensen, thinking ahead, and I think what he's going to try to do here is cast a Rogue Refiner before combat. And maybe see if... No, he's jamming.
His logic might be, well, Peter really has to cast the Gearhulk before blockers, because he needs that 5/6 body in play to protect himself. So if he played the Rogue Refiner sooner rather than later, Peter could flash in the Gear Hulk and use Essence Scatter and then get to have both the blocker and the nice effect.
Right.
If he attacks first, he's likely still going to cast the Gear Hulk, but won't have it as a blocker for the Roller Virtuoso or the Servant of the Conduit.
Yeah, see, I was thinking that Jensen might be able to find his own Essence Scatter with the Refiner, but if the Refiner gets countered, well, that's not going to do any good, is it? So it looks like Peter decided to take the hit here. Now he's going to play Gear Hulk to counter this Rogue Refiner, presumably. In fact, he kind of has to.
Yeah, that's quite a lot of patience on Peter's side. I'm not sure.
Is that too much patience?
It may have been too much patience because that's a big chunk of damage to take.
Right, he dies now, right? 2, 3, 4, 5. He actually is just dead to the board even if he blocks the Bristling Hydra next turn, assuming that Jensen wants to go for it and make a bunch of Thopters. And Peter decided, well, I'm going to let the Rogue Refiner live here because I need to find bigger, better answers than that. And he actually went for Glimmer.
Yeah,
there.
and if he was going to use the Glimmer, it seems to me that he should have done it in combat.
Just eaten up the Whirler Virtuoso.
Yeah, the main reason to wait would be if you want access to that Essence Scatter.
So potential misstep here from Peter Cadell. He finds himself woefully behind the champ, and he's going to need to find some pretty spicy stuff off the top of the library here, as Jensen has built out an overwhelming board state at this point. Oh, that's not good news for Peter.
No. So the best you can hope for is something like an Essence Extraction or multiple Fatal Pushes, but even that is going to involve his Gear Hulk chump blocking the Bristling Hydra.
You know what he was digging for? He has one Bantu's Last Reckoning in the main deck.
I see.
Yeah, he has just the singleton there, and he had the 3 extra mana. So he was basically, I think that he decided when Jensen played the Rogue Refiner that he could Essence Scatter it, but then just die anyway. And so he thought, well, I'm going to use Glimmer of Genius here to dig as far through my library as I can. He cast another one the next turn, saw a ton of cards, but couldn't find that Bantu's Last Reckoning, and that was Jensen picking up game number 1. We'll take a little peek here at Sebastian Payne versus Brian Braun-Duin.
Last year's world champion.
That's right.
So pretty funny, Brian Braun-Duin, a player who has had a lot of success with Temur Energy, placing finals of Grand Prix not too long ago with the deck in Old Standard. But despite Temur being pretty clearly one of the best decks in the format, he has elected something different this weekend in Esper tokens.
Well, we came at a pretty good time here because Sebastian Payne just resolved the Scarab God, but he is facing down some pretty cool stuff here from Brian. Brian looks like he is on the Esper version of this tokens deck. Apparently there's an Obzon version running around as well.
Yeah, so the bread and butter of the archetype is white and black, Legion's Landing, Hidden Stockpile, Anointed Procession, Anointer Priest. And from that point, you can go in a few different directions. You can stay just white-black. You're playing Evolving Wilds anyway, so a third color is not too costly. A lot of people go for Vraska, the Relic Seeker, which just powerful planeswalker in her own right, but also goes really well with the Anointed Procession and gives you an advantage in the mirror match, being able to blow up opposing enchantments. We're seeing becoming more popular this Esper version, which the big important blue card is Search for Azcanta.
Looks like Brian's trying to buy himself some time. He's going to use Finish to do just that to the Scarab God. Unfortunately for BBD, that only unlocks an attack for a single point of damage here, so not a permanent solution to the problem, at least not yet.
Temporary solution is okay, as he does have some cards on the battlefield that are generating him long-term advantage. And one important note on this in this game state is the Champion of Wits in Brian's graveyard. He definitely does not want to let Sebastian Payne take that away from him with the Scarab God.
He may have been buying enough time just to get it back.
He just scried to the top there with hidden stockpile, so let's see what he found himself.
By the way, Scarab God looking pretty good here for Sebastian. This is the Temur deck that has, splashing black for it. And we were kind of comparing it to Glorybringer earlier, but I got to say, much rather have a Scarab God in this situation than a Glorybringer, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Glorybringer would have just bit the dust from that start-finish. I guess the Scarab God's going to get answered one way or another anyway.
Yeah, it's going to get cast out. A very nice answer for the Scarab God, and one that I anticipate we'll see a bit more of in Standard if Scarab God continues to dominate in the way that it has. And a nice setup from Braun-Duin, too. You got to say it. He's doing a very good job of managing that Scarab God, killing it, forcing Sebastian to tap out again for it, and now casting it out and then playing a champion of wit. So BBD kind of firing in all cylinders here. He just needs to get another attacker in so that he can get that Legion's Landing transformed.
You can tell that the Esper Tokens deck is going to appeal to a expert player like Brian due to the amount of card selection that it has. Scrying, cycling, search for Ascanta, champion of wits. He just gets to see a lot of cards every single game, and when you give a really great player that ability, they can usually find a way to, have the tools they need and navigate to a win.
Yeah.
So it looked for a second like Brian had played a Glacial Fortress tapped. What he actually did was just shortcutted. He played it and used it for mana to sacrifice Champion of Wits to hidden stockpile.
Big threat next turn. Got a couple of those in the graveyard. Here's Chandra. What does she do here, though? BBD's at 14.
I've found Chandra often can be a very potent threat in this matchup, but it's one of those cards that you need the game to be close. You need the board state to be relatively even for her to really do what she needs to do. If Sebastian doesn't have a board presence of his own, she can just get picked away by the tokens of the Esper Tokens deck.
Well, there aren't any left because Sebastian just cashed in a braid. All right, well, it sounds like our main match is back underway, so why don't we jump back over there? We don't want to miss too much of it here. William Huey Jensen versus Peter Cadell. Peter, once again, though, with that... Oh, I spoke too soon. or maybe I didn't. That is a search for Ascanta. There we go.
Okay, so this is going to be a big turn or couple of turns in this matchup. This is the spot where William Jensen really needs to stick something to put the pressure on Peter. Otherwise, if Peter gets to enjoy a clean board state and just have search for Ascanta in play, he'll be able to stack his hand. And wow,
look at Jensen's brought to the table here, Reed. Nissa, Steward of Elements. He's going to get himself some value here.
Yeah, I really like the versatility of the threat with X in its mana cost, giving William Jensen the ability to play around Censor when he deems it appropriate, or just jam if he thinks he's got the green light.
And that's exactly what he had. So he's going to use Nissa here, scry.
That was both bottom.
Okay. Interesting, too, he gets to play around Essence Scatter by playing Nissa this turn.
That's right.
And that could have been a big blow there to Peter, as he could easily be staring down an Essence Scatter. More scrying here from Nissa.
So Nissa, Steward of Elements, not a card we see too often in Constructed, but I think one play pattern that we're going to start to recognize is the players are going to go out of their way to either put both cards on the top or both cards on the bottom, because if you put both on the top, that can allow you to use the 0 ability of Nissa to good effect the following turn. Looks like William Jensen both times has put both cards on the bottom, though, so he's potentially digging for something special or potentially just, saw some crummy cards on top of his library.
I wanted to talk about a strategic element here, Reed, as we see Jensen just jam once again with Bristling Hydra. There's a real temptation as the aggressor in this matchup to say, you know what, I think you have a counter spell. I'm not going to play anything. Is that a mistake?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Mm-hmm.
One really good technique is you identify the turn where you think the blue-black control player wants to spend their mana on something else, like Glimmer of Genius.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's the turn that you play your spell, because you put him to the test of, sure, you go ahead and counter my spell, but then you don't get to do what you wanted to do. The real disaster is if you say go without doing anything, and then the control player casts a Glimmer of Genius. That's when you really start to fall behind. So mapping things out to make sure you have a good threat to cast on those turns can be a way to get little edges in the control matchup.
Ooh, Supreme Will's going to hit the Scarab God here, and now the shields are down.
And notice what William Jensen did there is he used his Servant of the Conduit to cast a spell on his own turn, leaving 3 lands untapped, because he knows Peter Cadell can't do anything to his lands, but he could use a Fatal Push on his Servant of the Conduit, clear the way for a big spell. Wow.
Wow, and that was Jensen winning the match 2-0. Apparently, Peter thought, well, I'm not going to be able to beat Nissa's ultimate representing 10 damage. And that was it.
Yeah, that was...
Bang, bang, bang. We don't call him the champ for nothing.
That was an impressive showing. I would not want to be a blue-black control player having just witnessed that match.
Oh, kidding. Wow. All right, well, let's jump back over to the match that we were watching just a minute ago, Sebastian Payne versus Braun-Duin. This is Long Tusk Cub hitting the battlefield now for Sebastian, who still has that copy of Chandra. And what's happened over on BBD side of the board? Well,
he has eternalized a Champion of Wits.
Okay.
Refilled his hand. Now it looks like probably an upkeep activation of Renegade Map. That's going to give him an extra land and a free ability to trigger Revolt for Hidden Stockpile.
This is a good one. This is a good close one here. Like, Sebastian has put pressure on. Brian answered it. Then Brian kind of getting some value back with the Champion of Wits, but he is facing down Chandra and now a Long Tusk Cub. So this one's not over.
Crucially, the Long Tusk Cub can only become a 3/3. So on the board, the Champion of Wits can beat it in combat. However, this is only game 1, so Brian should be keenly aware of the possibility of Harness Lightning in Sebastian's hand. Looks like so far just a chump block, though it's possible that an end of turn Abrade could finish off Champion of Wits.
Oh boy, there's an Anointed Procession now for Braun-Duin. And this is where things get completely out of hand.
So if I'm Sebastian here, I'm thinking I really want to make an emblem with Chandra next turn, or I'm probably not going to win this game. And even that's going to be a tall order, as Brian's going to make a minimum of 2 servo tokens here.
Yeah, this one is slipping away very quickly here from Sebastian Payne.
Yeah, I mean, it's with double Anointer Priest, double servo token, it's getting to the point where maybe even a Chandra emblem won't be enough, as Brian can start gaining big chunks of life every single turn.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a huge turn for Braun-Duin. The Priest, the Procession. He already had the Hidden Stockpile going. But this one, not looking so hot from Sebastian Payne's standpoint, even with the Glorybringer. Is it even close to enough here? I mean,
well, it's a start. Glorybringer can unload some damage and kill off one of Brian's important cards, like the Champion of Wits or one of the 2 Anointer Priests. but it looks like he's accepted that he's going to be unable to protect his own Chandra, and from that position, you can't really beat the configuration of cards that Braun-Duin has put on the battlefield.
Yeah, he's so far behind now. He's trying to leverage the permanence he has to pick off threats, but the problem is that Braun-Duin can just replace those so easily at this point.
Yeah, my prediction actually is we might see Sebastian take one, maybe two more draw steps and then concede the game just to make sure he has enough time to finish the sideboarded ones.
Yeah, according to our graphic here, this is game 1. It's been a long one. We already had a complete match between Temur Energy and Blue Black. Admittedly, a quick one, but...
So BBD now with both legendary lands, Adanto and Azcanta.
Oh, yeah. He's going off now.
Search for Azcanta. Quite a bit of potential extra value in this deck by dumping Champion of Wits, Anointer Priest, or Start Finish into the graveyard.
How much more do you think Sebastian can take?
That's a good question.
He's kind of put his fingers on the table, maybe a draw step, looked at his watch there real quick. Oh, yeah. It's not getting any better here, Sebastian. This thing is... Oh, there's another hidden stop. Oh, come on. BBD, you beast. He's got a big pile of tokens there. There's 3 Anointer Priests on the battlefield right now.
Yeah, so that should be 12 life.
Back up to 35, just a cool 35 life. I'd like to see Sebastian draw like a Harness Lightning and be like, kill one of your creatures.
Yeah.
We're going to do it. We're going to grind through this.
Shock a servo.
Right.
I have to imagine that this tokens deck is pretty mentally exhausting to play in a long event like this, because you see this game. I mean, Braun-Duin has pretty clearly won the game,
right?
In a statistical sense. I mean, Sebastian's not going to come back, but Brian still has to keep playing for a number of more turns and continue being sharp with all his triggers. Every turn he's making tokens, he's gaining life, he's scrying.
Totally.
You can't really check out mentally, despite the fact that the game is largely over.
Yeah, and remember, this is only round 3, right? Like, we've got a lot more rounds to go, and I got to come back tomorrow and play it. All right, Sebastian's finally seen enough.
The tokens deck pretty successful on Magic Online, but that's a little bit of a different ball game where the program manages your triggers for you, and you can just sort of be comfortable in front of your own computer. But actually, with the adrenaline pumping in a tournament setting, we'll see if these token players can make it through the weekend without feeling the effects of exhaustion.
So, game 1 goes to Braun-Duin. We're here in Richmond, Virginia for U.S. Nationals. We've got cool format here. This is probably my favorite part about the new tournament here is we get to play Standard and then Draft later on as well. Just like kind of like a mini Pro Tour. And tomorrow we'll come back and we'll actually draft in the morning. And then the last 2 rounds of Swiss will be Standard, and then we'll cut to our top 8. Of course, the players here, just like at every Nationals, are playing for the chance to play for their country at the World Magic Cup in December. And the way this works, if you haven't been keeping up on it, is the person with the most pro points from that country from last season, just the most total pro points, is the team captain. The person who wins the Nationals tournament is deemed the national champion. And the person who gets second is their teammate of those 2.
Yeah, you make that player play the worst deck in Team Sealed.
And, of course, this time, I happen to be sitting next to the team captain for United States. I got Reed Duke with me here. Pretty cool, Reed, that we got a chance to get you in the booth since you couldn't play in this thing anyway.
Yeah, really exciting for me. If I hadn't made the trip here to Richmond, Virginia, I would just be glued to my computer screen watching every second of coverage anyway. So why not, show up, get a front row seat, and just watching and talking about Magic is what I love anyway. So works out perfectly.
Yeah, we're happy to have you along. And, of course, you at home, we're happy to have you along as well. We're in the early part, round 3, though. This is a little bit shorter of a day, so keep that in mind if you're watching from home, that we're playing 4 rounds of standard, then a draft, and then, of course, the 3 rounds of booster draft. But that's going to be our day. A normal GP day, we would do 9 rounds of Swiss in the first day. But this isn't a GP. This is a different one.
A little bit of extra time for the actual process of drafting and deck building. Be sure to clear your schedule to actually watch the draft. That'll be a lot of fun. I'd like to point out a pretty cool card that Sebastian has in his sideboard for this matchup, Crushing Canopy. At the World Championships, Owen Huey and I played Appetite for the Unnatural with, this Anointed Procession deck in mind. But Crushing Canopy does a lot of the same thing in destroying an enchantment, but can also potentially take out troublesome cards. Sometimes these decks play with Angel of Sanctions, or you might run into a different deck packing powerful flying creatures. Glorybringer, of course, a defining card in this format.
Right. Speaking of, there's one in hand there for Sebastian, who is being dressed, and it's going to be Chandra, or one of the 2 Harness Lightnings if BBD wants, though. Harness Lightning doesn't seem like the type of card that Brian really cares about.
Yeah, I actually take it as a little bit of a bad sign for Sebastian that he either didn't have enough to bring in to take out his Harness Lightnings or potentially has identified them as a good card in the matchup, because I think they're not really that strong in the matchup. You're mostly killing a token or a creature that has already done its job, like a Champion of Wits, by the time it's entered the battlefield. But as I mentioned, he could be just hedging his bets against some kind of surprise creature off of Brian's sideboard, like the Scarab God or Angel of Sanctions.
Well, that hedge is going to cost him this game, because Brian Braun-Duin has a pretty clear path here at this point. And with such a weak hand for Sebastian Payne, and the fact that BBD knows it, he just needs to sort of assemble the pieces of the puzzle. He's going to duress him again and hit a Harness Lightning.
Well, Brian doesn't have his most important card, which is Hidden Stockpile. So the game is certainly still contested, and it's really big for Sebastian that he hit his 4th land to continue applying pressure with Bristling Hydra here.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sebastian stuck with too many reactive spells in hand, but it looks like it's the same thing for Brian, as he has another copy of Duress, neither of which, the second one of which didn't really hit anything super great. If that was his best play for the turn, he's got Anointed Procession in his hand, but no token-making ability at the moment. And all of a sudden, Sebastian's like sitting up a little straighter in his chair as he's put up a really powerful board, and BBD with no defense as of yet.
So I see a Start Finish and an Anointed Procession in Brian's hand, as well as a Concealed Courtyard. So, of course, he could either play an untapped land. It looks like he has a Plains in his hand, but he could have cracked the Renegade map as well. But it depends on... he's going to want to be sequencing the next couple of turns here.
Well, he's not going to get a couple of turns at this rate.
No, it might be turning into Fumigator Bust here.
Sebastian has missed his Long Tusk Cub trigger the last 2 turns, which is unfortunate, but seems irrelevant at this point.
Well, he's done it's really convenient for him. He's done a nice job coming to this board state where he's able to put Brian at 4, because Brian had Start Finish in his hand, which can produce 4 ground blockers. So it's very important that Sebastian put Brian to a life total where the Glorybringer could kill in 1 hit in the air, because otherwise Brian would have had a great chance to stabilize that board. As it is, we're going to 3.
Yeah, Sebastian's revenge there, and I'm kind of glad that we got to see a game like that, though, just because every time we've had tokens on today, it's just had all the pieces and it's kind of been going off, and it's looked insane. And I'm sure people are wondering, well, why aren't more people playing this deck? This deck looks unbeatable. You can't really sweeper it. You can't use spot removal on it. It's resilient. It gains life in the later part of the game, so even if it falls behind a bit, it can come back. But it is actually a pretty touchy deck. It needs the right pieces of the puzzle to be in place before it can really go off.
That's right. It's a deck with a lot of moving parts. And as you mentioned, when those moving parts all fit together perfectly, it's a super impressive deck. But when they don't come together, or when the opponent's able to break them up with negates, duresses, disenchant effects, you do have a lot of individually pretty crummy cards in the Esper tokens deck.
Right.
Some games you're going to mull to 6 and have 4 lands and an Anointer Priest and a start finish, and it's like, what? I'm playing a below par draft deck from last format.
No kidding. And that game was a good example too. We saw Anointed Procession hit the battlefield. It did nothing. No tokens. So kind of tricky business to get this deck going, but the peak does seem to be there for it. Land for our players as we kick into game number 3.
Looks like both players are pretty happy with their hands.
Another duress here from Braun-Duin. Kind of interesting here. He could take away a negate, a harness lightning, or even an attune with ether. If he takes away the attune, he does leave Sebastian with just 2 lands, at least currently.
I would be very tempted to take the attune here because with the way Sebastian's hand is set up, it's not likely that he's going to be able to pass with negate open for a handful of turns anyway, particularly if he's choked on mana. So,
right. Because Sebastian just kind of has to play the cub this next turn, right?
I think so. Yeah, you're not gonna sit back on negate starting on turn 2, but Brian does decide to take it. Oh, and Sebastian drew another negate right away.
Did he really? Oh, they don't play around that one. Still, that's a nice one. Champion of Wits there for Braun-Duin. He's going to draw a couple, discard a couple.
Just smooth things out here.
But as we know, Sebastian does have in his hand that copy of Attune with Ether, which means the Long Tusk Cub is going to have a clean attack.
Yeah, so that's another thing is if Brian had taken the Attune, he has at least a hope that maybe the Long Tusk Cub won't be able to attack through Champion of Wits. I mean, it's not a great hope because Sebastian did get 2 draw steps to find a land for Whirler Virtuoso.
No, he wants to get rumbling right now. That's a choice there, right? Like, he could play Whirler Virtuoso there.
Yep.
But that means no attack, or I guess he would play it first and still have a good attack with the Cub.
Right. But it looks like he's
prioritizing negate here? Or?
Choosing to sit back on the negate, which, remember, Brian doesn't know about just based on looking at Sebastian's hand. So Brian's going to have to think, like, my opponent's representing negate, but do I really believe that he's had 2 draw steps and they were exactly mountain negate? That's going to be something Brian's going to have to decide.
What would be your inclination there? It's a pretty bold bluff for Sebastian to make if he doesn't have it, right?
It is a bold bluff, yeah. You that's a situation where you have to gauge the type of player that you're against.
Well, BBD's jamming, and Sebastian cannot negate quickly enough.
So that just worked out fantastically for Sebastian. Brian used his sideboard card, his duress, to try to clear the way for that Anointed Procession. Sebastian drew another negate off the top. Made a big sacrifice to hold it up on that turn, but he did nab one of Brian's important cards.
Yeah, this has also been tough because I don't know why, but again, Sebastian missed the trigger on the Cub. It did connect last turn. He had the 2 energy from the Attune. He just got an additional 2 energy here, and he just hasn't been adding any energy whenever it's hit. So maybe he is new to the deck or just forgot, but that's the kind of stuff that can look like a small mistake when you're crushing your opponent, but if it gets real tight, he'll wish he had another, 2 or 4 energy in the bin. There's a duress. This one is going to hit that harness lightning that was left over, but you can see the hand from Sebastian looks pretty nice here. And it looks like he's just going to windmill slam Glorybringer on the battlefield here. And you can see why. That's a lot of damage. Take 10? Ouch.
He's deciding not to pump the Cubs, so just 9. Didn't get his energy. Again.
No, I think he just doesn't know. Ooh, but there's Fumigate from Brian Braun-Duin. And that'll get him right back in this.
Yeah, Brian doesn't have a lot left over in hand, but he does have that Champion of Wits waiting for him in the graveyard if he draws a few too many lands.
By the way, this is a situation that we were just referring to, where now he's got Whirler Virtuoso, but he's down 6 energy here. That'd be pretty handy for some Thopters at this point, as he could actually put out a pretty reasonable clock on Brian, even if Brian starts to get some tokens going.
Yeah, you never know when an extra Thopter here or there can determine the outcome of a close game.
They're Servant of the Conduit now for Sebastian. He's going to attack for 3, but that's going to draw a Fatal Push here. Still taking 2 is Brian Braun-Duignan, who really needs to get the action rolling here. This can help, but this draw step really needs to find something. He didn't, did he?
No, but he's going to flash back the Champion of Wits here. He just needs to decide if he wants to play the planes and perhaps leave open a mana of a particular color or keep the planes in hand as a potential discard.
Okay.
He opts for the latter.
So there's that Eternalize. Discards lands and plays one out of his hand. So this is going to get very close here, because Brian is on the verge of turning the corner and taking over, but there's another good draw step from Sebastian. He finds a Bristling Hydra.
Good, but not great. It's going to become difficult for Sebastian to get through on the ground if Brian's deck starts functioning the way it's
I
meant
was thinking
to.
it's just another Thopter.
Yeah, that's right.
It does seem to be his main win con at this point, is getting some stuff up in the air. Uh-oh, but there's Fumigate number 2 for Brian.
Fumigate's so good against Whirler Virtuoso.
Yeah, that is a beating.
Oh, geez. And the turn that you have to say go in the face of an active Azcanta the Sunken Ruin is the turn that you know things are not going your way.
Right. The teeter-totter starts tipping back over to Brian Braun-Duignan, who even now has a backup Fumigate in hand. Still, BBD has not actually found a way to win the game, so he is going to need to dig around for that, but having fully stabilized the board, he's got to feel like he's in good shape.
Yeah, from this position, having removal in hand and Azcanta in play, I think it's just a matter of time.
So Brian Braun-Duignan started things off 2-0 and is looking to be in good shape to be 3-0 here. What did you see?
Just a little bit of a weird, tap my mana, use Renegade map, retap my mana.
He's playing very quickly. But this is the Scarab God, and that is certainly the death knell here for Sebastian, whose draw seems to have really abandoned him and fallen flat. BBD is going to go ahead and dig up a Bristling Hydra out of the graveyard. Turn into a zombie. Get a trigger. Probably activate the Scarab God again here. Get yourself a little GB.
Going to be an upkeep activation of the Scarab God. That's to get an extra scry and point of life drain.
Got the Whirler Virtuoso.
We finally see why Brian has his own energy counter. It's when he steals enough of his opponent's cards. He has to keep track.
Always prepared, Brian Brown-Duin. Now he's opting to not attack with the Hydra here.
Yeah, he could have done that because he had put it into play at the end of the turn.
Must have just been an oversight.
Maybe he's playing around Torrential Gear Hulk in
Okay.
some kind of specific way.
Okay. Yeah. I don't like to second guess. It looked like he just was going to just start jamming.
Yeah, this is a board state where I think Brian could care less about dealing damage to his opponent because he knows he's going to win in a couple of turns regardless.
Right, he has inevitability on his side. Well, in the meantime, Sebastian did draw one of his most powerful cards with Glorybringer, though it does feel a little too late for it here, as he forces BBD to use up 3 energy to protect that Bristling Hydra. But Brian doesn't really have anything else to spend it on anyway outside of that Virtuoso, so he's just going to do it.
I feel very thankful that Brian is a very precise and organized player whose game states can become quite a mess.
That's right, and it, in fact, became such a mess that Sebastian Payne has now conceded the match, and that's Brian Brown-Duignan improving to 3-0 to kick things off as he dutifully returns all of the cards that he had stolen from Sebastian Payne. That's going to do it for our live coverage here from round number 3. We'll be right back, though, with some Time Walk. Don't go anywhere.